Black Lives Matter? This seems to be the popular question in today's society. With recent news and popular belief, it has led many people to answer the question, of course and yeah, and of course the biggest one, all lives matter. And all of those are true, but recent statistics would prove that they actually don't. According to the CDC.gov website, which I took my own journey in looking into, that black people commit 49.2% of all homicides in the United States alone, with them only making up of 13% of the population in the United States. 49.2% of them are actually committing homicides. This is way too big of an overrepresentation of the African American race. Compare this to the white community, where they make up 52.1% of all homicides. Although that number is above the 49.2% of African Americans, white Americans actually make up of 77.2% of the population. So the 77 compared to the 13% of the population that is made up of the Americans in the United States, the African Americans are way too high in the areas of homicide, rape, and even HIV. With these statistics, I also continued my research in the FBI and crime prevention websites, where you will learn there, and also in this, the links I will provide before you on this video. In 2011 alone, the cause of death that appeared among the age group chart of the CDC.gov website, the homicide deaths were actually between 1 and 54. Number 2 of the leading cause of death amongst the young infants was also homicide. So even in the young infants, they are being a victim of homicide, and these are African Americans at that. Whites make up of, like I said, the 77.35% exactly of the population, of the U.S. population, but they only are committing a total exact percent of 88% of the homicides, compared to the 93% of the African Americans who are actually committing the homicides. This is some shocking statistics that I found on one website as I continued my research that will actually shock you. According to this crime prevention website, homicide was represented in every age group between 1 and 54, as I said. But what was not said here is that over 1,400 blacks were killed by other blacks in the 2 years, then were lynched in the years of 1882 and 1968. So just between that large gap of years and those 2 years time frame, African Americans actually killed more people there than they had ever killed in the slavery days, as many of us like to call them. Also reported, 537 black males have died already this year by the hands of an officer. So it's obviously officers also are part of the problem. But to say that they're the only problem will be a misrepresentation of statistics and facts. We, as African Americans, are making one area more popular than the other, or one focus on one area than the other. And what we have to do is take a broader spectrum on looking at the whole statistics and evaluating what is the more epidemic, what is the more cause of death, what is the leading cause of death, and it's obviously homicides amongst black on black. With what I said, the 537 black males who have died by the hands of officers, actually more have died by the hands of white officers, are killing more white people than it is black people. And this is probably because, to be fair, there's more white people than there are black people. A lot of people think that there's actually, the population is more half and half whites, half blacks, a little bit of Hispanics, but like I showed you and just told you, that they're only making up of 13% of African Americans, and whites are actually making up of 77%. So with these statistics, it's very fair to make sure when we are researching these credible sources that we're taking information from, that we factor in the ratio between population and the crime, not just crime. Because some research that I was pulling up was showing a lot of crime that whites were committing and that were overpopulating the crime that blacks were committing, but they're not factoring in the ratio of the population that they represent in the United States. So I encourage you to take your own journey on finding the statistics on African American deaths, black on black violence, black on black crime, and the officers who have killed black people. So it's very evident that they, of course, are doing that, and the numbers are actually rising in the black community with officers taking the lives of African Americans. but the numbers cannot even touch the numbers that African Americans have killed other African Americans. And that leads me to one of my shocking, last but not least shocking statistics about African Americans. It will take the police 40 years, this is according to the crime prevention websites, 40 years to make up of the amount of African Americans that were killed black on black due to black on black homicides. It will take them 40 years to make up just a bit of that number. So it's obviously that the police are a problem, but they're not the biggest problem. So all our resources and all our personnel should not go towards funding and supporting that when the big epidemic is with the black on black homicides and violence. Now, there's statistics and news can continue to go on, and I can continue to give you more information, but I encourage you to do your own research and find the credible sources for your own take and be able to look into it for yourself. I encourage you to look at the links I'll post below, and also just Google it for yourself. Use those credible sources like cdc.gov, fbi.gov, or even .org. There's a crimeprevention.org or .gov website, and those .govs and those .govs and .govs, those .govs and .orgs are the most credible websites you want to use because they're a little bit more, they have more analytical information involved, and those people who are recording are actually trained to do so. They're not just you or I who can just post anything on the internet, and they're not Wikipedia, so I would advise you to stay away from that. So do your own research and get your own understanding of the topic. Do Black Lives Matter. This is Chris, and I'm signing off.